710 Keel is your news and weather station.
News Radio 710 Keel, Robert J. Wright and Erin McCarty. It's 12 past 8 o'clock online at 710keel.com.
You are such an OG.
And via the Radio Pup app. It's a free download for your smartphone, your iPhone, your Android, everyone but my Cricket phone with buttons the size of checkers.
Look who wandered in the studio this morning.
Joining us this morning in studio is Caddo Parish School Superintendent Dr. Lamar Goree. I'm just going to start with what you said a couple of seconds ago. The voters of Caddo Parish have sent a clear message. What are you thinking? What's going on?
Wow. Well, good morning. I tell you, this is the first free morning that I've had in a while. So I'm almost like a kid on the first day of summer today, I tell you.
You come hang out with us,
Yeah,
huh?
but other than the fact that I feel like I just ran 3 full marathons and walked in. But you're right. The voters of Caddo Parish have spoken, and we certainly, as a school district, have great respect for that. And we will continue to move forward in our strategic planning process. And we will continue to develop programs and opportunities for children to be successful in school.
You want to feel like Pac-Man a minute? Can I throw a few punches? You
Bring
ready?
it on. Bring it on.
Okay, you going to close?
I promise you, you cannot top the punches I've received over the last few months.
You going to close some schools still?
You know, if we look at this from a fiscal responsibility perspective, there is no way we can continue to operate the number of buildings that we're operating. We're operating, this school district at one point, as has been pointed out, even by the opposition. This school district was built to educate quite a few more students than we have today. In that perspective, we have to make sure that we adjust our facilities as well as our human capital so that we have the resources.
Human capital means jobs.
That's people.
You're gonna fire some people?
No, and it's not my intention to fire people. My intention is to make sure that we are as right-sized as we can be. One of the advantages of being a system as large as Caddo is that through attrition, you generally take care of any reductions in positions and people.
Pardon me just a second, but you said something interesting. Do you think maybe part of the problem going into the election this past weekend, and you used the term right size, do you think maybe part of the problem was that people were voting on $108 million that they didn't feel didn't have to do with right sizing?
You know, what I will say to that perspective is that I think if you look at some of the conversations and some of the things that were said around this, I think some of the issues were that when we talk about right sizing, we as a system have never done a great job of closing schools or even accepting that buildings need to close so that we can be more fiscally responsible. At the same time, I think that there's a faction that believes that we have buildings, so let's utilize those buildings. And why take on additional debt to build new schools when we actually have schools and we maybe just bus kids into those existing facilities, which is certainly the direction that the city has said that they want us to take. And, that's pretty much the only option we have now.
The bond issue was way more than just the closing schools, building 3 new ones. There was so much else in there. School buses, air conditioning, heating, improvements at some schools. We need new buses. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about some of the other issues that were included?
Right, and I tell you that's one of the hard parts of my job, but luckily I find that to be one of the challenging and encouraging parts as well. Though now we have to look at the resources that we have, and we have to determine what will we do and how will we get those goals accomplished. When you look at things like the needs of the buses, and that's law. That's not something that's a luxury. We have to look at general fund. We have to look at any other opportunities. We'll look for grant opportunities. We'll be as creative as we can so that we can certainly meet the needs of the district. When you look at renovation of our science labs, I just feel that's something we're going to have to find a way to do. So some of those things that were in the plan that did speak directly to academics, we're certainly going to have to find a way to do it. But you have things like the expansion at the Career Center. As much as I believe that's something we need in our community, that certainly probably won't be a high priority because of the impact of cost. But again, we'll look for ways to do everything that was in the plan.
Can you hang around with us for another segment?
Why not? Where do I have to go today?
Because we want to ask you, coming up next, can I ask you this question? What killed it? Can you answer that in a minute?
I'll take that question from you, Erin.
Okay.
Dr. Lamar Goree, Caddo Parish School Superintendent. Good morning. It's News Radio 710 Keel. Robert J. Wright and Erin McCarty, 22 past 8 o'clock. And here for another segment is Caddo Parish Schools Superintendent Dr. Lamar Goree. Go ahead, ask him.
Before the break, asked you what killed it. What was the problem?
Wow. And, I had the break to think about it, and I don't know. I think that, first off, I do think and appreciate people coming out to vote. Even though we lost, I do think it was split. I mean, 47 yes is not a horrible showing. However, I do think that there's a clear message that I don't know if it was information not actually getting to the citizens. I do think some of it was maybe some of the confusion around the information. And I think this is just a situation that we don't often find ourselves in our parish. And because of that, the way we react to it and the way we respond to it, it affects that. I think there is certainly a movement in our country around no new taxes, even though this was a renewal. I do think, the opposition did a very good job of painting this as a tax. And in that respect, I understand that it's not a reduction, but generally you see renewals pass pretty easily across the country, but not in this case.
I had mentioned to Erin when we were chatting a little bit about you being here today in the 6 o'clock hour, I had speculated. I said, no matter what kind of optimism Dr. Goree and the folks at the school, no matter what kind of optimism you guys had going into this, I assume you had some kind of meetings. Well, what happens if it goes south?
Right.
So, can you tell us about the meetings? You've got to have a plan B, yeah?
You know what I was saying? I shared this at the press conference. In January, when we presented the plan, the question was asked of me by one of the board members, what is your plan B? And my response at the time was there was no plan B because we had just that much faith in the process that we used to develop the plan.
I had asked you one of your first visit here. I said, so what happens? What's your compromise?
What I will say is that even as I've talked to stakeholders, as I've listened to both sides, and I have such great respect for the opposition and every position that they present, I do believe that in our plan B, we'll look at our strategic planning process and we will develop within the resources that we have, within the facilities we have, the best opportunities for students that we can. I'll tell you, I purposefully have pushed the rollout of my strategic plan off a month because we went into this in January, and maybe we were, this naive young superintendent thinking that this is the best thing since sliced bread. Went into this was kind of the direction that led our strategic plan. But, as I listened to the stakeholders and especially some of the oppositions, I started to wonder if we would, how this would work out if it did not pass and how this would affect our strategic plan. So what you'll see in the month of May, we will continue to refine our strategic plan and do a January rollout of Reimagine.
For the folks in the Blanchard area, and I could hone in on any area, you can't close either of those schools, correct? They both have a lot of kids in them.
Which other schools in Blanchard?
Timmons or Blanchard Elementary. You couldn't close either of those, could you?
Well, what I'll tell you is you certainly cannot close Blanchard Elementary at this point. Timmons, as a part, we will look at all of the suggested schools and we will determine which schools will close. We'll say no to Blanchard, don't know on Timmons. But what I will tell you is that we're really focused now on graduating our seniors next week. Really looking forward to, and I really need to see that. I need to see the ending of that and see those students leaving our schools and going off to do wonderful things. But after that, we will make some decisions.
So now I would assume the real lobbying by neighborhood associations and schools and principals and moms and dads, because they know something's got to give.
Well, and what I will tell you, though,
I would imagine over the next, probably before 5 p.m. today, that the pressure on you is going to start to, not my school, not my school, not my school. What's that going to be like?
What I'll tell you, though, is I think the honest part of that is that, we as a community made a choice, and there's some other choices that go into that. I mean, there's a cost associated with educating a child in a small school. And there's a cost associated with educating a child in a school, like say, if we talk about Barrett, where there is an immediate need to add an elevator with a tag of right around $900,000. So I do believe that there should also be, at the same time, some of our opposition needs to come forward and talk about some of the ideas they have around how do we fiscally do that and be responsible too.
Let me ask you this. There was some opposition that said this had nothing to do with addressing teacher pay, and that was a big issue that was brought up. Where are we in terms of bringing our teacher pay up? We look at DeSoto stealing our teachers right and left with their higher salaries. And a lot of concern here that we need to do something about teacher pay, which wasn't addressed.
Right. And what I'll tell you though is when I came in as superintendent, the first thing I addressed was a balanced budget, and I gave every employee, or I led the effort to give every employee a pay raise in this school district. And that was the first pay raise that any employee in this district had seen since 2008. I do believe that showed a clear commitment of this administration to support rewarding our teachers for their hard work. At the same time, when we rolled up to January and we did have an increase in our had a pretty big influx of monies from our sales tax, we chose to once again reward our teachers. Was my experience in Texas. I never worked there 1 year that I didn't receive a pay raise. So pay raises are the norm to me. And I will continue to work hard every day to find opportunities to reward the teachers and the staff and the employees for all of their hard work. So that certainly will be a part of my everyday plan in Caddo Parish. Will there be some challenges? Absolutely. But we will continue to work on that.
Got to go to break here in a couple of seconds. Thank you, Dr. Lamar Goree, for joining us. One more quick question, which will probably lead to 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, it always does.
But leading up to Saturday's election, you had a number of public hearings and meetings and neighborhood get-togethers, however, whatever you want to call them. As you are now faced with, as you have said, the possibility of closing some schools, are you going to have those same kinds of meetings to get people's feedback in those neighborhoods?
And what I'll say is we've not designed a program or rollout as to how we'll do it, but I do think and know that in this community, the engagement component is imperative. So I think you can look to see a lot more meetings. But the thing that I challenge the people to do is come. We had all of these meetings, and the crowds were just not acceptable to say that we were talking about educating our most precious resource, and that's our children. So I encourage people to hold us all accountable for attending as well.
You could go back to the office today. You got to lead the troops. What's your attitude?
I'm always, I'm one of those guys. You're not going to get me down. I'm very encouraged. I feel challenged in the respect that there are some things that must happen, but I live for this. I signed up for this job. I love this parish. I have skin in the game, so we will go and we will make this work. And that's what Caddo Parish does, and that's what we've done in the past. We just look to see this place better than we found it, so we will continue to work towards that end.
Superintendent Dr. Lamar Goree, we thank you for your time today.
Appreciate you.